Hello, my name is Michael Fudge and welcome to the SQL screencast. In this screencast, we'll be looking at the data definition language in SQL to create and drop tables and add columns, keys, and constraints. Then we'll also be looking at the data manipulation language so that you can insert data into your tables and read the data back out with the select statement. This is a basic introduction to how to create your tables and add data into them. Okay, I'm starting in my own personal database, as you can see up in the database window up here, and I'm going to start by creating a table. And in this particular example, we're going to deal with products like product catalog, maybe a website where they sell products. So first I'm going to create a product types table. And this product types table is going to have one column called product type, and we'll make that a varchar 20 and not null, because we don't want to allow null values. We have to enter a value here, and we're also going to set a constraint on this of primary key. So constraint pk product type primary key product type. Now why, oops, I forgot my opening and closing brackets. Now why giving it a name pk product type? This name is arbitrary, but it helps you identify the constraint that you added at a later time. For example, suppose I want to get rid of this constraint, but I don't want to delete the entire table. There's a way to drop the constraints by name, so it's important to give them a name that you're going to remember and recognize. Also, if there's an error that's thrown as a result of this constraint, it's very useful to be able to see the name of the constraint and say, oh, that's a product key, that's a primary key on a product type. Okay, so I've got my SQL in here. I'm going to hit execute. It says command completed successfully. So you might be wondering, what did you just do? So later on I'm going to show you how you can query the information schema to through SQL statements find the table that you created. But for now I'm going to use the Object Explorer. If I go down here into my database as part of the Object Explorer, and if I just refresh the table listing, I should see product types in here. And if I design this table, it brings up the GUI mode, and you'll see that I have product type varchar and it's set as primary key. So again, I could have done a bunch of typing and clicking in here to do the same thing, but the advantage of using the SQL statements is that once you do it and once you get it right, you can just merely save it as a text file somewhere on your local system, and then whenever you want to recreate this table structure, you can do it again by opening it up and re-executing the SQL. Okay, so I have my table. One other thing I want to talk about is if I execute this again, I'm going to get an error because there's already an object named product types in the database, and this should make sense to you. I can't create the same object twice. I could call it product types 1 and run it, but that doesn't really solve our problem here. So the issue is what if you want to create the table and have the script always recreate the table? So what you can do here is you can add a drop table product types at the top, and this will first execute and delete the table, and then this command will run and recreate the table. So in this nice little script package here, I can execute this as many times as I want. Each time it's first dropping the table, then the second time after it drops the table, it's going to recreate the table. So again, at this point, all I have is a basic table with no data in it. So the next step is let's add some data. To add data, you need to use the SQL insert statement. This is not DML anymore, or this is not DDL anymore. This is DML, data manipulation language. Okay, insert into product types, and I'm going to insert the product type That's the column I want to insert into, and the value I want to insert is, let's just make some simple things up, book. And I'm going to copy that and use copy and paste are my friend. I'm going to also move this down a bit so we can fit it all in here. Okay, book, hardware, software. And after I do my inserts, I'm going to do a select so that you can and of course I made a mistake here. It's not intro, it's into. Whoops. Let me fix that 3 times over. Alrighty, so now I'm deleting my table, recreating my table, adding 3 rows into my table. Then this last command here is going to show you the output of the table so that you can see that there's 3 rows of data in it. So let's run this, and I've got a mistake somewhere, so let's see. It's not value, it's values. So yeah, I make my mistakes too, but the advantage of this the syntax checker is it will check you. Okay, so there we go. So now I have delete the table, recreate the table, add 3 rows into the table, and then run the select output. Okay, next we move on to the products table. And our products table has a product ID which will serve as primary key, and in this case I don't want to have to enter a number for the product ID, so I'm using the identity modifier to the int data type. The identity modifier says system, you put a number in, and I don't care what the number is as long as it's unique. Then I have the name of the product, varchar50, the cost of the product, which I'm using a decimal value, 2 decimal points, and I'm always also setting a default. Generally, when it comes to ordinal values like numbers, integers, dates, you want to try and set defaults to avoid null values. Even though I'm not allowing null, it's important to set a default so that something gets inserted in there. Then last I have the product type, and I've set 1 constraint on the primary key. If you look at this table, you might say, well, I need to have other constraints. Like, for example, you don't want someone to enter a product cost that's a negative value. So to accommodate those kinds of rules, you need to add different types of constraints, like check constraints. And for example, you wouldn't want 2 product names in there, 2 products with the same name, so you need to use a unique constraint. Let me give you an example. So if I do a couple of inserts here, let me just copy them and paste them. Here's my paste, and if I execute that, you'll see that I've added three products. This kind of illustrates the importance of constraints, because in one row here we made 2 mistakes logically in our data. Is one, we are allowing negative values to go in our product cost, which that doesn't really make a lot of sense, and 2, we want to restrict the types of products to books, hardware, and software. This is obviously a typo, and we'd like to avoid that. Also, it doesn't make sense to have the same product name in there more than once. Even though this is the primary key, we want to set another constraint on this to prevent the user from inserting the same title book in more than once. So what can we do about this? Well, we need to add some additional constraints to our create table statement. To handle the title issue, we want to have a unique constraint on product name, and to address the negative values for product costs, we want to say check constraint on product cost greater than or equal to 0. And finally, we need to set a foreign key constraint on product type. And foreign key constraints are kind of interesting because they're a little complicated. Foreign key, and the name of the foreign key is product type, and now I have to say that it references the table product types, and the primary key in that table is product type. Okay, so let me explain this. You're saying I have a foreign key in my table called products, and the name of the foreign key is product type, and product type is associated with the primary key named product type also in this table, product types. And what that does for you is that says you can't enter a value in the product type column that isn't already found in the product types table. So I need to enter either book, hardware, or software. I won't be able to enter in this book. So let me run this now. We'll execute it, and you'll see now that we get some errors here because we have we're violating a unique key constraint here. Makes sense. We're violating other constraints. So let me change this around. So let's say learn ASP.NET 3.5. Let's re-execute. Okay, so that's good. We're still violating unique constraint here. So let's change this to learn Windows 2008 server. And let's execute that. And we still get an error because we're still violating the check constraint here with this value, because it says product cost of conflict occurred. Tells you all about the check constraint. So we need to give this a valid value. Let's say that this book costs $44.95. And then if we execute this, now we're violating a foreign key constraint on this because this has to either be book, hardware, or software. So I'll just change it to book. And then when you execute it, you finally get the data to insert. So hopefully you understand that in your table design, it's important to add the constraints because these constraints guarantee that the data is going to go in there accurately. And remember, it's part of good database design is to make sure that your data goes in accurately. And that's the whole purpose behind the constraints. And this concludes our webcast. Hopefully you've learned a little bit more about how to create and drop tables and add your columns and constraints, and then add basic data using the insert statement and also pull it back out with the select statement. Okay, we'll see you later, and there's more screencasts to come.